Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm Marcel Wieder, coming to you from our studio in downtown Toronto. Has the government gone too far with new proposed legislation designed to fight terrorism? We'll discuss this with Trinity Spadina MP Adam Vaughan. And it's just been over 100 days since John Tory took over as Mayor of Toronto. To review what's happened, we're joined by now City Hall reporter Ben Spurr. All this and more on this edition of The Point. The Conservative government has proposed a bill that would extend authorities' powers to spy on and detain Canadians suspected of participating and supporting terrorist activities. Civil liberties advocates say these measures go too far and put Canadians' freedom and privacy at risk. During recent hearings in Ottawa, the Tories blocked the Privacy Commissioner from appearing in front of the standing committee studying the bill. To discuss this, we're joined by Toronto MP Adam Vaughan, who was a former reporter and city councillor before being elected MP for Trinity Spadina in last June's by-election. We're joined by Trinity Spadina MP Adam Vaughan. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So remember, Canadians are concerned about what's happening both internationally and domestically. The government has brought in some new legislation, and we recently saw a Conservative MP post on Facebook an ad that actually had footage from a terrorist group, and they're trying to get Canadians to sign a petition and to support the government's plan, even though it's their own legislation.
It's interesting times in Ottawa, and I think that the behavior of the MP, and he's not alone in this. I think a number of members of the government are doing it. I hate to use it's hard not to use language which makes you uncomfortable. Taking advantage of a terrible situation internationally that's had some very serious implications and some very tragic events in Canada, but taking advantage of it and both stimulating fear and then trying to profit from that fear by fundraising off of it. It's peculiar behavior. It is a serious issue and it should be dealt with seriously. But using terrorism to both scare Canadians and as a catalyst to raise money for political parties. And some of the other behavior, sort of targeting and stigmatizing good Canadian citizens, all of it begins to I think, create a very disturbing pattern. So, yes, we're in difficult circumstances. Yes, we have to make some tough decisions, but it should not be seen as an opportunity. I think Canadians are rightfully appalled by that kind of behavior.
Now, you just mentioned that the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party are working on a campaign of fear amongst Canadians. What's the reaction been in your community to this type of effort?
Well, I represent a very diverse community. Downtown Toronto, is home to families from all over the globe, and as a result, our perspective on these issues is fairly highly developed. As a result, we've come from places, many of us, that have had difficult moments like this, and we know a couple of things. We know that you need to strike a balance between public safety and the public's right to civil liberties. That it's not an either-or equation. That you need to be able to do both, and I think the public is prepared to have a mature conversation about it. What they don't like is the way fear is being used to both compose the balance, but also to sort of motivate a political base. And I think that they are rightfully shying away from that conversation, and are more focused on actually trying to build a Canada that works.
So, what is the Liberals' position on dealing with the threat that we're facing?
Well, the Liberals have been in this position before. We were in government after 9/11, and also were the government that took responsibility for the Air India inquiry and worked very hard to implement some of the recommendations on that. We understand the need to build and to evolve preventive detention, especially in an age when the internet is being used to trigger people to do some very, very serious things that cause a lot of damage to people and have caused 2 deaths in this country. We know that has to happen. But we also know that we need preventative measures. You know, the extremists who are radicalizing individuals primarily through the internet, they trigger events that happen very quickly, and so you've got to. It's one thing to respond, and we need to have the capacity to do that, and we need resources if you're going to do that properly. And the RCMP have not received the funding they need to adequately respond to some of these threats. But the real issue here is preventing them from the beginning. It's you know, the government criticized Justin Trudeau when he talked about getting at root causes as a way of preventing some of the tragedies. The reality is that getting at root causes is exactly what we need to be doing in terms of turning people away from their computers, turning them away from making some very, very bad decisions that have dangerous implications. We need to prevent these things as much as we need to be able to stop them, because it's a lot cheaper to prevent them, and at the end of the day, it's a lot healthier to stop them than it is to have to endure them. And so those are some of the things that we have to focus on. Yes, we need to build on things like the no-fly list. Yes, we have to get government agencies talking to each other across silos, and we need to have oversight of those two functions in order to make them work properly and protect people's civil liberties. But there are things that are good about this bill. They're buried in amongst some very sloppy language and some very worrisome omissions. And we think that if we can package it together and make those changes, the bill can strike the proper balance between public safety and protecting the public's civil liberties.
That raises a very good point. The government's proposed bill, the C-51, they're holding hearings on it right now, as I understand it. And in fact, they've had a list of witnesses, but they omitted the privacy commissioner from appearing before it. Now, your party has said that you'll support, in principle, C-51. Are you planning on bringing some amendments on the bill? And how would you improve this bill?
Well, first and foremost, parliamentary oversight. The Five Eyes, the intelligence partnership that sort of spans the English-speaking world with New Zealand, Australia, the United States, so on.
And England.
They all have parliamentary oversight of a committee of parliamentarians that review the new measures that are put in place, and to make sure that the communication is appropriate, to make sure that Canadian laws and the Charter is being obeyed. We're the only English-speaking country that doesn't have that, and we think that needs to be there. And modeled after the way in which the Australians in particular and the British have put together not a committee of parliament, but a committee of parliamentarians that has the capacity to investigate and to hold security forces accountable. That's the first thing we're looking for. And we actually have a private member's bill that's been introduced that actually tries to achieve this long before C-51 is even tabled. We'd hope that legislation could just go through, but the Conservatives are reticent to provide oversight. So that's one thing that needs to happen.
Now, your riding of Trinity Spadina represents a very ethnically diverse community. How have the comments by Conservative ministers on the issue of the niqab and others played out in your community? There's a concern out there that there's a division of us and them taking place among Canadians that will tear at the fabric of our community, of our cultural mosaic.
Yeah, and look at the riding includes a very significant neighborhood that has a large population of women who are members of Islam, who are Muslim, who choose and have the right to choose under our charter the ability to express themselves by wearing the hijab and some in the niqab. It's a choice, and it's a choice that is made in the tradition of Canada, honoring and protecting religious freedoms. I think it'd be fair to say that Muslim women in particular are often the part of the Muslim community that bears the brunt of Islamophobia. And I think they have a reason not to feel safe because they are being stereotyped and they are being singled out by this Prime Minister. And their rights as women, as Canadians, is not being, I think, respected by a political party that again is trying to torque fear.
I'm reminded that there's a hashtag, not sure if I'm going to get it right, called Harper Headwear, and it shows, a Catholic.
I think it's Dress Code PM.
Oh, Dress Code PM.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Where it shows people of different faiths wearing head covers they're similar to a hijab.
Margaret Atwood posted a picture of Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
I think that says it all. Look at we don't ask. Reasonable accommodation is possible on this issue. It's about freedom to choose. Women do have that right to choose how they express their faith, but there is, as you said, has been a sort of a poke back at the Conservatives, which is rather funny and humorous at times. Where you had, I think, there's a woman playing hockey who asked if it was okay if she could keep her goalie mask on when she represented Canada at the Olympics. There were all sorts of statements made back to the Prime Minister, that quite frankly, that he should stop worrying about what women dress, especially if he's not concerned about, for example, missing and murdered Indigenous women, where he does have a responsibility to protect people's charter rights, and he's silent. The fact that he gets all wound up in a tizzy around a hijab or a niqab and does nothing around that issue, he's not protecting women's rights to choose. He's not protecting women's right to live in peace and security. In fact, if anything, what he's doing is highlighting the hypocrisy sometimes inside his own government. This is a very simple equation. And for the Liberal Party in particular, the Charter means something. And defending the Charter is critically important. It doesn't mean you abandon public safety. It's not the NDP's choice where they seem to suggest that it's the Charter or public safety. The Conservatives have exactly the opposite perspective. It's public safety or the Charter. We're, I think, a sophisticated enough society that you can have public safety and protect people's charter rights. And the Liberal Party is prepared to do both. Will we accomplish that with the hearings and the legislature that's in front of the House now? Highly unlikely. The Conservatives are not a party that is collegial or consensus building around these sorts of issues. But the good news is that before anybody really has to deal with some of these new laws, before they really come into full effect, there will be an election. We have an election coming. That election is not just a time to clear up Bill C-51. It's a time to change the direction of this country and move it back to a country that respects the Charter, respects Parliament, and uses the police for public safety, not for political ends.
Member, thank you so much for joining us. I'm joined by Liberal MP Adam Vaughan from Trinity Spadina. I look forward to having you back again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Up next, Mayor John Tory recently celebrated a milestone of 100 days in office. We'll discuss this with Now Magazine City Hall reporter Ben Spurr. John Tory came into office with high expectations. After 4 raucous years with Rob Ford, Torontonians were looking for a different approach at City Hall. The mayor recently passed his first budget with a 3.2% tax increase by a vote of 42-2. However, to get his budget passed, he had to break a campaign pledge and increase TTC fares. To look at Tory's first 100 days, I'm joined by veteran City Hall watcher and Now Magazine's contributor, Ben Spurr. Ben, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been just over 100 days since John Tory took over as mayor of the city. Mm-hmm. How would you rate his first 100 days?
I think, he's still kind of in that honeymoon period to some extent. He's still got a lot of opinion polls show he's got a lot of popularity among the public. I think he's done a few smart things to really, make. I think when mayors get into office, they want to get kind of quick wins a lot of the time, just to show that they're, that they can succeed at the job essentially. And he's done that pretty well in terms of, he's got announced new TTC funding. He's launched a major traffic congestion crackdown, which I think seems to be popular, even though we're not entirely sure how effective it's been. But I think that's something that's resonated with the public. So. Those things have been good. There's also been some hiccups. He was not a councillor. He's never served on council. So there are a couple of things that seem kind of like rookie mistakes to some extent. He made it look like we were going to get a lot of money from the province to fix the budget. Announced that twice, really. So we thought that we were going to get money, and then we thought we were going to get a loan, and then it turned out we didn't even get the loan, so that was a bit of a hiccup. Another kind of hiccup with the ice rink closures. He made it look like he announced a deal that the corporation had come in and saved the ice rinks to keep them open a little longer, but it turned out that the company had a conflict with the city, so couldn't make that donation. So that kind of seemed just a little like he got a little overeager or a little optimistic about some things that didn't turn out as well as he thought.
Well, compare John Tory's first 100 days with, let's say, his predecessors, Rob Ford and David Miller. How do you think he stacks up on a 100-day watch?
Well, I wasn't. I have to say, I wasn't reporting on City Hall for either of those predecessors' first 100 days. But I think it is typical of mayors to move very quickly on achievable goals in the first part of their term. So Rob Ford, famously killed the car tax very early on. Got City Council to declare TTC an essential service. Those kind of things that he had promised during his campaign. That's what you want to do. You want to like seal up some quick wins right away.
Now, he just recently won a major vote, his first budget by 42-2. The only two people to oppose him or to vote against it was the former mayor, Rob Ford, and Councillor Giorgio Mammoliti. How did he manage to get both the right and the left to support his budget?
Well, I think that is a part because he is the new mayor. I think he won't have as much an easy time in his next few budgets. And so I think sometimes the council votes in recognition that the mayor has a strong mandate from the people. He's just come in, he's just won the election, so they're willing to support him. But I think that actually that 42-2 vote is a little bit misleading in terms of there are a lot of concerns among some members of council about the amount of revenue that the city has, and so the actual vote the day before on the tax increase was not nearly as unanimous. And you have councillors like Gord Perks who were pushing for a higher increase. There are councillors like Shelley Carroll who is playing a key role in the Tory administration, talking about the need for more revenue tools. Even the city manager has come forward with that. So even though there was a lot of support for the budget, there is a lot of concern, I think, about Tory's unwillingness to consider new revenue tools, and that's going to be a conversation that goes on.
Ben, what are some of the highlights from the mayor's budget? There's always a concern that some services will be cut. During the Ford administration, there was talk about parks being cut back, rinks, etc. Are we seeing any of that in this budget?
Not so far. What you are seeing is that things are getting more expensive for people. So they raised garbage rates, pickup rates by 3%. They raised some recreation fees, I believe, as well. The big piece about the garbage is that right now people get a rebate on the amount that they pay. And that's been drastically reduced. So everyone's going to be paying, I think, 58% more for their garbage bin that they own. So
does that include also the recycle or just the?
No, I believe it's just the bin. Yeah, because the garbage,
black bins.
Yeah, because they want people. What they're trying to do. One thing is they need to raise money, and this is. It's sort of everyone talks about the inflationary tax increase on property taxes, but there's kind of going around that and raising money in other ways, and this is one of them. So so that's one thing, but they're also trying to encourage people to, if you switch to a smaller bin, obviously it's cheaper. They're trying to encourage people to recycle and to divert waste, essentially.
Now, John Tory staked his campaign on a platform of Smart Track.
Yeah.
Where are we with that? Now that we have the budget passed, where is that stand?
So the council has commissioned a study on Smart Track, another study specifically dealing with one of the most difficult parts of the line. So basically, we're still at the study phase for that, and there's still a lot of questions to be answered about the funding and exactly a lot of questions were raised during the campaign whether or not the funding mechanism that he had proposed would work. So it's still a lot of work to be done on that, and so it'll be some time before we know exactly what the next steps will be.
I have to think that there's a warehouse somewhere in the city of Toronto that just has transit studies in it.
Yep.
And so we're now again going to see another study. For how long is this going to take?
Essentially, the thing is, this one at the moment has a lot of political buy-in because it coincides with the province's plans to electrify the GO corridors east and west of the city, and so you would think that the province would have a lot of interest in making sure it happens. So the stars seem to be aligning at the moment, and so this seems to be the one that has the most support behind it. So it does have a chance of going forward for sure.
Now, you talked about the province, and the province has committed approximately $15 billion over the next 10 years for the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area for transit. And so the mayor is going to be fighting for transit dollars with his fellow mayors in Peel and Hamilton and Markham and Vaughan and elsewhere. How's that stacking up?
Well, I think there's no doubt that Toronto will get a large amount of that funding, just given that Toronto's the biggest city in the province, and that everyone knows that traffic congestion here is quite bad and needs to be improved. What I think is going to be interesting is whether or not the Smart Track plan sucks up any money from the other projects that are already planned for Toronto. So that would be like the Shepherd LRT line and the Finch LRT line, which were not the mayor's priorities for sure. And so there is some concern from people who support those two lines whether or not there will still be money left over for them. It'll also be interesting to see whether or not it affects the Scarborough subway plan. I mean, that seems pretty locked down at the moment, but it is more expensive than the LRT line plan there. And so you just wonder how much pressure really the funding for Smart Track will put on some of those other Toronto projects.
Now, at the top of the interview, you mentioned that the mayor went up the street to Queen's Park asking for money on two different occasions and came away with nothing.
Yeah.
The mayor had a lot of high-powered provincial Liberal support. What do you see as the relationship between City Hall and Queen's Park?
Yeah, I mean, Tory's one of his main pitches during the election was that he was the best positioned leader to work with the higher levels of government to win funding for Toronto, and so far that hasn't materialized. And I don't know if that's too surprising. I mean, it's still early days. I don't know if anyone expected the province to come knocking with like hundreds of millions of dollars in the first couple of months. But what was interesting is that they just seemed on the opposite pages of things. Like, so when the money to plug this hole in the budget fell through, and it turned out that the province wasn't going to bail out the city on that, there was just mixed messaging. Like on the same day, you had Tory and provincial minister giving different accounts of what had happened, and it just did not seem like that they were on the same page. So I think I'm not quite sure if Tory's concerned at this point. He says that conversations are ongoing, but it did certainly seem that there was a lack of coordination that you would not have expected given given the Tory's pitch during the election.
And just briefly, he also went up to Ottawa looking for dollars for infrastructure and transit. How successful was he on that front?
Well, he didn't secure anything tangible yet. I think I think that it's less important to get money from the federal government. I think that the main source of funding for these big infrastructure transit projects is going to be the province. And so I'm not sure again if he expected really to have anything tangible from Ottawa yet, and I think those conversations will keep going on as well.
Ben, thank you so much for sharing your insights at City Hall, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with The Point. In school, I was taught one of the fundamental differences between Canada and the US is that we were a cultural mosaic and they were a melting pot. Over the past few months, we're seeing the mosaic start to fray. Harper's government has attacked Muslim women who wear a niqab, calling it anti-women. It reminded me of the uproar in Quebec when Premier Pauline Marois' government introduced its Charter of Quebec Values that banned any religious symbols worn or displayed in government offices or facilities. As Canadians, we welcome the world to our country. Successive waves of immigrants brought their traditions and culture here, enriching Canada. My parents were among the scores of immigrants who came to this country after the Second World War. In time, they adopted Canadian norms and tradition, yet they maintained their heritage, which was passed down to me and now to my children. There is a fear of those that we do not know and who are not like us. Yet in one or more generation, these new immigrants adopt Canadian traditions. Just look at the Sikh police officer wearing a turban or tune into Hockey Night in Canada in Punjabi. This is just one of the many examples of how our cultural mosaic has flourished and enriched our country. We cannot allow the politics of division and fear to tear apart what we have woven over 150 years. And that's the point. That's all for this edition of The Point. Follow us on Twitter at Watch The Point, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm Marcel Wieder. Thanks for watching.